Hey everyone, Troy Peterson, Mr. Bluegill. And when it comes time to fishing walleyes, a lot of people think of trolling crankbaits or a jig and a crawler or maybe some slip bobbers. And sometimes you got to think outside the box. And I know a lot of bass guys, when they come and fish central Wisconsin and northeast Wisconsin waters for smallies and largemouth, they're throwing a lot of crazy looking plastic style baits that catch walleyes. So over the past few years, I've really been doing a lot of experimenting on what type of baits really work well for walleyes and cross over obviously for bass, or vice versa, work great for bass and cross over for walleyes. And one of the companies, Zman, makes a lot of great plastics with their Elastec baits. And you can see we've got a whole kind of lineup of jigs and plastics that we use. First off, we got a Willow Vibe. It's kind of a bladed jig. Then we've got the Pro Shrooms, which is a Ned style jig. And then a couple of the Ned style baits. We've got the ticklers, we've got a hula sticks, and then we get into a scented jerk shads and a scented paddlers. And we also have the regular, let's see here, the regular TRD, which is just a doesn't have the skirting or the little tassels on it like the hula sticks or the ticklers. All of these baits serve their purpose. When I'm fishing, let's say a Ned rig, typically what I like using Ned rigs for is when we find a lot of really big boulder areas or fishing a lot of gravel or rock. Works great. It's a stand-up jig. You kind of bounce it along the bottom and those fish see it and they go down a lot of times and they'll pin it down to the bottom. Probably the most important thing for locating fish is having electronics. And we're using, the Humminbird stuff here. I've got a couple Solixes with our charts. And right now we're going to kind of dissect a point and a couple reefs that are off the edge of this point. And like I was saying, is that a lot of the reefs out here, they're not the same. Some are going to have just gravel, some are going to have big boulders, others are going to have weeds on top of them as well. And when you can find big boulders, when you can find weeds mixed in and some nice sand flats off the edge, those are main areas that you really want to key in on, and that's exactly what we're finding here today. So we've got some bigger boulders that we're looking for. We've got, I know there's some weeds just off the edge of these rocks, and you've got some shallow flats that these fish can kind of cruise around and look for bait. But right now we're going to concentrate on this area up here that's going to have some bigger boulders, and down here. One thing you're going to want to have in the boat with you at all times when fishing with the Zman Elastec is a bottle of super glue. This stuff here is going to be used pretty much every time you rebait, and I'm going to show you real quick on what we're going to do here. We're going to put one of these tiny ticklers on. We're going to put that on. Now it's really hard to just push these things up and have them stay because of that Elastec material. So what you want to do is kind of pinch it, snap it back down, and then that way there it pulls, that elasticity pulls up, gets over the top of the hook keeper, and make sure it's nice and tight. But to keep it from rotating and to really make sure that we're going to keep it up next to the jig head, we're going to drop this back down and put just a little dab of glue on top of that bait. And because of the elasticity of the bait, it's going to suck up and hold tight to the Pro Shroom's head, and that should keep it in place. So every time you rebait, just make sure you're putting a drop of super glue, whether it be these Ned rigs or even on our swim baits or jerk baits, to keep that thing up tight to the jig head so it doesn't keep sliding back or twisting. A little drop of super glue goes a long way. So when I'm casting Ned rigs in these shallow waters, the water tends to be pretty clear as well. And you're really spooking these fish if you're doing a lot of moving around. So what we're trying to do is cast as far as we possibly can to get it away from the boat. And what I've got here is I've got the Identity series from Elliott. This is a rig and jig. It's 7'4". I've got a Vanford 2500 paired with the new Seaguar PEX8 line. This is the 10-pound. It is extremely thin, but the pink, the visibility allows me to watch my line. But the reason for that is this allows me to cast a super long ways away from the boat and work it back. And it always tends to be that we always get bit towards the end of the cast, and that's why we're using what we've got. So we're gonna make a couple casts here with the Ned rig. And you can see, I mean, I'm casting these things, well over 100 feet to get it away from the boat. And the nice thing too, fishing with the braid, is you can feel every little rock, every little bite. If they're picking it up and dropping it, we can feel that fishing that braid. And then at the end of the braid, I've got a 10-pound gold label leader. Usually run that about 3 feet or so, just to help with the abrasion resistance from the zebra mussels and to keep the line invisible for the fish next to the jig. Now, how I like to run my Ned rigs, or how I like to fish them, is, especially when we're in these rocks like this, shallow rocks, I'm just kind of hopping it along. You can see just real subtle motions. I'm keeping my rod tip up so I can feel everything, and just kind of a little bit of a shake. And I've got the TRD ticklers on here, so it's got these little fingers that allows it to give it a little bit more action as it's happening over the tops of these rocks. The biggest thing when you're fishing, finesse style fishing like this, is keeping your line tight at all times and watching your line. We're just kind of hopping this thing along or shaking it along the bottom, and I'm watching my line at all times, because a lot of times these fish will come in and they'll grab it and they'll start swimming towards you right there, just like that one. All right. Boy, some cookie cutters here in this spot. A lot of these little guys, but again, he just kind of inhaled that. And this is that 2 3/4 inch ticklers. Nice little walleye. Let him go. So that fish came on a 2 3/4 inch ticklers from Zman. This is that Elastic. The nice thing about this stuff is it's very, very soft and subtle. So when the fish come up and grab onto it, it's not going to really have a whole lot of hard feel to it, and then they'll finally take in the rest of the bait. They've got a couple different models that I really like using. When I'm fishing the rocks, I'm either going to be using the ticklers or just the standard TRD. These are both 2 3/4. And if we get into a little bit more aggressive bite, or if we're in the weeds, then I'll actually jump up to the these are the hula sticks. These are a 4-inch bait, and again, it's probably just a little bit longer. You've got the tentacles, and as this thing's sitting down in the water, you're getting a little bit more movement than you do with the standard TRD, or that's why we use the ticklers here. When we're fishing the weeds, I like to use a little bit longer bait, just for a longer profile, so that way when we have to rip it through, those fish get a real quick glance at it, and they come over and they typically just smash it. When we're fishing the rocks, they tend to be a little bit more picky, and they can see it. So if you've got a longer bait, there's a lot of times where they'll come in and they'll just grab that tail on that 4-inch on the hula sticks. So one thing I'll do is either cut down that hula stick, or I'll go back to the ticklers here like we have on right now. Oh, there we go, we got one on there. Just a little shyster. As you can see, he just smoked that Ned rig. Come on, buddy, get off there. Little guy. We've got a lot of these little guys in this system. It's good to see, and he's going to get to swimming again.